If there is a character that stands for progress, if there's a character that symbolizes a bright future, if there's a character that is able to bring Zaun out of the darkness and into the light, that character is Jayce. Jayce is a character who in Act 1 represents the light of the future, and a character who in Act 2 descends into the darkness of corruption. Let's break it down. In general, Arcane is a visually dark show. It makes great use of shadow to convey meaning, but the overall darkness of the show makes the scenes that are especially bright stand out. This is one such scene. When Vi, Powder, Milo, and Clagger raid Jayce's home, the lighting is bright. The light of Piltover shines radiantly into Jayce's room. Even before we, as an audience, see Jayce, he's associated with the light of the future. The directors could have easily made this scene happen during the nighttime. If I asked you to imagine the scene of a robbery, you wouldn't imagine bright lights and broad daylight. You would imagine darkness, secrecy, and the absence of light. But the directors chose specifically to break that trope and show Jayce's house being raided during the daytime for the sole purpose of associating Jayce with the light. In episode 2, we see Jayce's face for the very first time. I want you to pay attention to the color of his eyes. It's yellow and bright, like the sun. Jayce is one of the few characters in all of Arcane that has yellow eyes. If you actually look at Jayce's splash art from League of Legends, his eyes are blue. The character designers of Arcane changed this detail about Jayce to more closely associate him with the light. This was a conscious choice, it's not an accident. Though subtle, this character design choice gives more reason to believe that Jayce represents the light of the future, or at least in Act 1. When we later see Jayce, he's undergoing a trial for experimenting against Academy regulations. Just look at the lighting of this scene. Everywhere except Jayce is dark. The council is shaded in darkness, mirroring their shady deals and illegal business practices. The people watching the trial are also in darkness, but they're in the darkness for a different reason. The people watching the trial do not stand for the future of Piltover like Jayce does. They are in the darkness not because they are corrupt like the council, but because they simply do not shine as bright as Jayce. When Jayce's trial concludes and Heimerdinger gives him his sentence, the council room lights up, bringing everyone into the light, except for one person, except for Jayce. It's ironic how Jayce, the symbol of light, is the only one in darkness as the light fills the room. As Jayce's Hextech dream gets crushed, he takes his first step into darkness. When Jayce talks to Caitlyn in the rain, his eyes are dull. As he says defeatedly that he will give up being a scientist and join the Talus Hammer business, his eyes fade. They've lost their yellow, their shine, and their radiance. This gives us a look into Jayce's character at this moment. He has lost the sparkle in his eyes, his vision for progress, and his hope for the future. When we next see Jayce, he's contemplating suicide, looking over the landscape of Piltover. This is one of the many landscape shots in Arcane that gives off a sense of insignificance. Against the backdrop of Piltover, Jayce feels so small. And then, as Jayce loses all hope, as Jayce metaphorically and literally shuts his eyes and locks away the hope that he has for the future, Victor interrupts him. Victor is another one of the few characters in Arcane that has bright yellow eyes. Victor, much like Jayce, sees the progress that they can make with Hextech. Their eyes, sharing the same hue, depicts to the viewers that Jayce and Victor share the same dream. Victor, literally and figuratively sharing Jayce's vision, pulls him out of the darkness and saves his life. The next scene we see of Jayce is in episode 3, where he and Victor are speculating about how to stabilize Hextech crystals. It is in this scene where we see Jayce and Victor's relationship develop from colleagues into partners.
Scientists seek discoveries, ways to make the world a better place. This Hextech dream of yours has the potential to do that.
Our Hextech dream.
In this interaction, Jayce realizes that he's not alone, and that he has someone who shares his vision. And the next time we see Jayce and Victor, the lighting will reflect that. When Jayce and Victor are found by Mel outside of Heimerdinger's lab, Mel shines the light on both of them. Both of them are now symbols of light, symbols for progress, and partners in their vision for a brighter future.
You're the professor's assistant.
No, he's my new partner.
Heimerdinger's lab is dark, and the only light that illuminates the room radiates from the Hextech crystal. When Jayce and Victor get the Hextech crystal to work, we get a focus on Jayce's eyes, and then an immediate cut to the Hextech crystal as the screen gets filled with light. Jayce is floating, and his creation literally fills the room with light and magic. Mel's words at the end of the scene reaffirm Jayce's dream and give him hope for the future.
Perhaps it's time for the era of magic.
Hextech. For the era of Hextech.
This is the last scene we see of Jayce in Act 1. When we see Jayce in the beginning of Act 2, we get to see Jayce's dream fulfilled. Act 2 begins when Heimerdinger tells Jayce to give the annual Progress Day speech. Jayce states himself,
But you always give that speech. I could never take your place.
I agree with them.
As Jayce finally accepts Heimerdinger's offer to give the Progress Day speech, Heimerdinger opens the door to the balcony as the audience gets a shot of Piltover. This landscape shot gives off feelings of grandeur. With this single shot, we get the idea ingrained into our minds that Jayce has done this for Piltover. He has made his dream into a reality and has improved the lives of people with his technology. Not bad for someone who at one point lost all hope and purpose. As the crowd gathers around Piltover Square, our attention focuses on the banners that label Jayce as the man of progress. To the people of Piltover, Jayce has become a sort of idol, something to be praised as more than just a mere man. No, a man of progress. Notice how Victor, the person who saved Jayce's life, the person who gave him the push that he needed and helped him to realize his dream, gets no praise at all. He isn't even acknowledged by the people of Piltover. This foreshadows the idea that soon, even Jayce will forget about him. The only time we see Victor alongside Jayce for the rest of this act is when we are away from the praise of Piltover and its citizens. Victor, in this shot specifically, is on the side of the screen. The camera is centered and focuses on Jayce, leading the audience to develop this subconscious belief that Victor stands in Jayce's shadow, or at least when it comes to the public eye. When we see Jayce next, he's attending the Progress Day party that the elites of Piltover hold each year. In Act 1, Jayce is separate from the elites. Think back to the council scene. However, in Act 2, Jayce becomes more and more like the elites of Piltover. He shares drinks with them, and will soon, for better or for worse, become like them. As we've already established, Jayce is closely associated with the light. In this scene, the scene in which Jayce starts to become ingrained into the Piltover elite, the sun sets. Jayce's light, as represented by the sun, sinks under the horizon. This scene marks the beginning of the night, and the end of the light that the Jayce of Act 1 represents. Jayce pulls Mel aside and has a conversation about what to present in his speech. Let's take a deeper look into Mel's character design for a moment and figure out what she represents. First, let's take a look at Mel's eyes. Mel's eyes aren't vibrant like Jayce or Victor's. They're dull. When you look at her face, you don't notice her eyes. You notice her makeup and gold jewelry. Mel wears heavy black eyeshadow and complements it with a streak of gold down her bottom eyelid. This draws attention away from the dullness of Mel's eyes into the facade of makeup and jewelry that she puts up. Mel doesn't use makeup to further complement herself. She uses makeup to hide what she is. Now, let's return to the conversation between Mel and Jayce. Watch this interaction closely.
Heimerdinger is a great scientist, but he's old. He only ever sees the past. Piltover needs a leader who looks forward. Someone like you.
You really believe that?
Hextech has the potential to change everything. The world is ready. I've already spoken to several.
In this conversation, when Jayce asks her if she really believes in him, she switches the conversation to Hextech. Mel doesn't really value Jayce. The only reason she keeps him close is because she can use him for profit. When we are first introduced to Mel, we are informed that she's the richest person in Piltover, and yet she is still unsatisfied. Steady business is stagnant business, according to her. Mel is the epitome of greed. No matter how much she has, she always wants more. She has no problem taking advantage of people around her if they're able to be used for profit. Jayce is not an exception to this rule. This is what Mel tries to hide with her fancy jewelry and embroidery. She puts up a front of elegance and grandeur in an attempt to lure people in so that she can take advantage of them. Look at the scene not as a conversation between Jayce and Mel, but as a conversation between the light of the future and the darkness of greed. Now, when Jayce presents his speech, he doesn't listen to the advice of Mel. He takes heed to Heimerdinger's words and recognizes the danger of putting Hextech technology into the wrong hands. However, in preserving his character, in listening to Heimerdinger, and in rejecting the advice that Mel gave him, Jayce betrays Victor and their dream. In this scene, Jayce had to make the difficult choice between choosing his dream while abandoning the safety of the city, and choosing the safety of the city while abandoning his dream. There really is no right choice for Jayce here. He has to choose between both Mel and Victor, and the ethos of the Academy. This is good writing. It places both Mel and Victor on the same side of the choice, and when Jayce gives his speech, it's both a win and a loss for his character. It's a win because he's able to resist Mel's greed, and it's a loss because he damages the relationship that he has with Victor, and by extension, the relationship that he has with his dream. Also, a quick side note, in the scene where Jayce gives his speech, Victor is in the shadows. Next, Jayce is given a seat on the council. Mel sells Jayce to the council by justifying it with this.
Does the boy have any experience?
Only that of a scientist, like Heimerdinger.
But you always give that speech. I could never take your place.
Jayce stated earlier that he can never replace Heimerdinger. But now, through Mel's guidance, and the greed that she stands for, Jayce begins to do exactly that, even if he isn't 100% in it at the beginning. One more thing to note, as Jayce is elevated into the council, Victor is in the shadows in the background. It isn't long before Jayce soon forgets his partner.
He's dating back months.
This is a poor use of our time.
I'm a counselor now, Victor. It's my responsibility to make sure the Hex Gates are safe and protected.
What about our pledge to improve lives?
In episode 5, Victor reminds Jayce of their dream, and Jayce dismisses it, stating that he has other important responsibilities. Jayce, in the past, has always been framed with light. In this scene, the scene in which he tells his partner that their Hextech dream is no longer his top priority, Jayce is shrouded in darkness. This scene ends with Victor going to the lab and Jayce following behind. When we next see Victor and Jayce, Victor is toiling and working towards scientific discovery, attempting to reinvigorate Jayce's old dream. What does Jayce do as Victor toils for scientific discovery? He fixes himself in a mirror. He worries more about his appearance than working towards his dream. In the scene when Jayce asks Victor if what he's doing is even safe, Victor responds,
Safe?
Of course not.
If it hadn't been established enough before, this scene marks a critical change in Jayce's character and shows the audience the type of person that he has become. Would the Jayce of Act 1 have asked this question? Obviously not. The Jayce of Act 1 experimented against Academy regulations with dangerous crystals in his own home. In Act 1, Jayce brought danger into his own home in order to work towards and realize his dream. In this scene, he shows that he doesn't even want to go near it. At this point, Jayce isn't even the same person that Victor saved in Act 1. Jayce has been corrupted by the Piltover elite, especially Mel, and the very next scene encapsulates that. The violin concerto scene deserves a video of its own, but in essence, it marks the point of no return for Jayce. As the concerto shines with light in the foreground, Jayce is in the background with Mel in the darkness. At this point, Jayce succumbs to Mel and to her greed, and falls into corruption himself. Listen to Jayce's words as he signs a deal with Counselor Amara.
You know, Counselor Madara's right. The Hex Gates are only the beginning. In fact, we're currently looking for new partners in our Hextech research. And as a supporter of House Talus, you'd be the first in line to any of our advancements.
How can I say no to such an auspicious offer?
Hextech partners.
Has a nice ring, doesn't it?
This is the point of no return. All it takes is one act of corruption for you to be considered corrupt. When Jayce shakes hands in the darkness, he shakes hands with corruption, welcomes deceit, and throws away his dream. When Jayce calls Amara his Hextech partner, it directly parallels the scene where he calls Victor his Hextech partner.
You're the professor's assistant.
No, he's my new partner.
At this point, Jayce has forgotten about his dream, forgotten about progress, and most importantly, forgotten about Victor. In the next scene, Jayce sleeps with Mel as Victor nearly dies, toiling towards unlocking the potential of the Hex Core. Jayce, once the light of Piltover, the ideal, the man of progress, the symbol for the future, at this moment sleeps with greed. Only when Jayce wakes up from his sleep with greed does he realize that his partner and his dream are dying. He's notified of Victor's condition and has to come to terms with it. This gives me hope for Jayce's character in Act 3. Although he falls into the traps of corruption and greed, when he wakes up from his sleep with greed, he realizes what is truly important to him. It only takes the shock of his partner's rapid decline in health for Jayce to wake up from his delusion. In episode 6, we get this beautiful image. Jayce lying on Mel's lap, observing the painting. Jayce on the right is on the same side as the sun. For the first time in a while, Jayce is associated with the light. He's on the right side of the frame, and that's where the light comes from. However, when we move further left into Mel's side of the screen, the light begins to fade, and the painting becomes more concrete. I've stated before that Jayce is associated with light, but I never really delved into what exactly light is. Light is abstract and unfocused, but it's bright, and it has a lot of potential. This perfectly describes Jayce in Act 1, a kid with a vision, but no means of realizing that vision. While Mel is undeniably a symbol for greed, she's not 100% bad for Jayce. For Jayce, Mel is also the catalyst that allowed him to channel the abstractness and potential of light into something more concrete. Mel gives Jayce the power and the resources to realize his dream, but at the same time corrupts it. Without Mel, Jayce wouldn't have the resources to realize his dream, but it is also because of Mel that Jayce falls into corruption and sleeps with greed. The painting demonstrates not only the idea that Jayce still can represent the light, not only the idea that Mel gives Jayce the opportunity to channel that light into reality, not only the idea that in transforming the light into something concrete, Mel reduces its radiance, but also the idea that Mel is painting the picture for Jayce. Whether or not Jayce can escape the picture that Mel paints for him is up for the events of Act 3 to decide. The last scene we get of Jayce is when he removes Heimerdinger from the council. This echoes back to the phrase that he said to Heimerdinger at the beginning of Act 2.
You always give that speech. I could never take your place.
Well, that's exactly what Jayce did. In removing Heimerdinger, Jayce replaces the only person in the council who cared for progress and the ethos of the law with a person who now has ties deeply rooted in corruption. Jayce, through the events of Act 1 and 2, has shifted from the epitome of light, the representation of progress, and the symbol of the future, to the embodiment of corruption, the fall into greed, and the path towards deceit. Jayce has taken a descent into darkness. Whether or not Jayce will realize his dream, fight for it, and redeem himself in Act 3 is up for him to decide. Will Jayce rediscover his dream and become a light for the future, or will he sink deeper into greed and corruption? Well, I don't know. I guess we'll find out in Act 3. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like and share it with people who you think might find it valuable. And if you want more Arcane analysis in the future, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day, everyone.